All right, so here we go. We're going to talk again about solving quadratic equations. That's what this whole thing has been about. We've talked about how we can solve them by factoring using the zero product property. We've talked about how we can solve them using graphing and seeing where those two x-intercepts are. And now we're going to talk about another way that we can solve these quadratic equations. So that's what we're talking about today. And the number of solutions. So let's talk about this first. If we have x squared equals some number d, if d is greater than 0, so if d is positive, then there are two solutions. You just have the square root of d. So what am I talking about? Well, if we have x squared equals 16, then the answer is x is the square root of d plus minus 4, because that's the square root of 16. Okay? If d equals 0, so if we have x squared equals 0, well then it has one solution. Okay? It is 0. Technically you do the plus minus thing, but plus and minus 0 doesn't have a positive and negative. It's neutral, it's 0. So there's one here. And then there's this. We've touched on this yesterday, or last time we had notes. When d is less than 0, so if I have x squared equal to negative 16, okay? It has no real solutions, and that's all we're going to say for right now. There are answers when you get to Algebra 2. You're going to talk about something called imaginary numbers. We are not getting there right now, so just understand there is a way to do some work here, but for our purposes, if you have x squared equal to a negative number, we are saying no real solutions. Okay? Because it does have imaginary, no real solutions. So there's our three. We have two whole numbers, we have 0, or we have no reals. But it won't always be a perfect square. And we've done plenty of stuff with square roots, and this is where we're going to use it. So, if I have a problem like this, I need to solve this equation. So you solve equations, you take a look. I have just this x squared term here. So the first thing I'm going to do is try to isolate the variable. 3x squared equals 27. What's the next step? Okay. So now I have x squared equals 9. So now where this next step comes into play. So if you think about it, I had subtraction, so I added, because those are inverse operations. I had 3 times x squared, so I divided, because multiplication and division are inverse operations. So now I have x squared equals 9. What do you think the inverse of squared is? Yeah, it's square root. So I square root both sides of the equation. All right? So then I have x, because the square root and squared are inverses, just like over here, plus 27 minus 27. Okay, it adds up to 0. It's gone. 3 divided by 3. I don't write the 1 in front of the x. Here, square root and squared are inverses, so it's gone. Okay? And we've talked about how we can pair them up and take them out. It's the same ideas in play here. Over on this side, the square root of 9. We broke down 9 before. 9 is 3 times 3. The 3's get out. Okay, that's not new. But what is new is this idea here. Plus or minus square root of 3. Why is that? Why do we have to do that? Well, if we go back to thinking about our parabolas, right? So this would be a parabola, intercept would be 27, but it would hit 2 places. It would hit it positive 3, and it would hit it negative 3. Okay? So algebraically, so there's a graphic explanation. Algebraically, why do I need both of them? Well, if I come back here, if I substitute 3 into this problem, you know you can check your work. So I plug 3 in. 3 times 3 squared minus 27. Does that equal 0? Sure. 3 squared, 3 times 9. Minus 27, 27 minus 27. That works out. 27 minus 27 is 0. So, what's negative 3 squared? Negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9. So if I check this, that works out also. They both work. All right? So, what you need to remember, one, we wrote it here with d is positive. It's going to have two real solutions, the plus and the minus. All right? Two, graphically, it has to do with that parabola hitting the x-axis twice. Algebraically, if I plug them both back in because of the squared, it's going to work. Okay, so you need to understand just whatever you're solving an equation with an x squared, you're going to have a plus minus in it. All right, moving on. So I have x squared equals 0. This is where you won't have, because I square root both sides, and I come up with 0. And that's it. There's no plus minus on a 0. Sorry. All right. Now I get to this one here. What would the first step to solving this equation be? What's the next step? And for our purposes right now, whenever you get x squared equal to a negative, no real solutions. That's all you need to do right there. Okay, x squared equal to a negative, no real solutions. Now, slightly different setup here. I've got the x minus 1, but it's in parentheses. So I got to do the stuff outside the parentheses first. So let me rewrite this. Whenever we have the x squared outside the parentheses, now our first step is to square root, because I need to get rid of that x squared first. And just like here, x squared and square root, I'm left with just the x, because those two are inverses. Here, I'm left with just x minus 1. Okay? We said whenever we take the square root, we're going to get plus minus 5. That's where the plus minus is coming into play, not at the end, in the middle of the problem here. So now I have x minus 1 equals plus minus 5. Well, technically this is two different equations. X minus 1 equals 5, x minus 1 equals negative 5. So you need to write both equations. Don't be lazy and try and do this in your head. Write them both down and solve them both. Plus 1, plus 1, plus 1 here. So I get 6 and I get negative 4. All right? So solve the equation like normal. So now you have two solutions, and we expect two solutions. We talked about this a lot. The square there tells me I'm going to have two answers. Think about your parabola. It's going to hit the x-axis twice. So now I've got 6 and negative 4. If you don't believe that these are the answers, I can always plug them back in. 6 minus 1 is 5. 5 squared is 25. Plug in negative 4. Negative 4 minus 1 is negative 5. Negative 5 squared is positive 25. They both work. Two answers. All right. Do on your own number 1, 2, and 5. See if you can figure 5 out there. I tell you what. Let's do 5 together first. All right, so our first step, I told you, you got to deal with this stuff outside the parentheses first. I don't want to deal with this squared until it's the only thing there. I want to deal with the 4 first. So let's divide by 4 on both sides. We can't distribute because of the x squared. Okay, we got to just divide by 4 on both sides. Now, you could divide that 2.25 and get your answer, or just leave it as a fraction. Now, you get the same answer either way. Square root both sides. Remember, these are inverses. I'm just going to get this left. Over here, square root of 9/4. Well, we talked about that in the radical chapter. What's the square root of 9? What's the square root of 4? Yeah, so that's 3 over 2. And don't forget, whenever you take the square root of a number, you need the plus minus. All right, now, again, I need to write two equations here. X minus 3 equals, and x minus 3 equals. Take this and write it as two separate equations and work them out. Plus 3. Now, some of you are good with calculators, some are not. Sometimes your directions will say to the nearest tenth. But if it's a nice easy fraction, they want a nice easy fraction. So this is 3, this is 1.5, so that's 4.5. You can also write 9 over 2. Add 3 to both sides here. Negative 1.5 plus 3 is 1 and 1/2, which is also 3 over 2. Get a calculator if you need it for the fractions. Okay? So there's our two answers. 1.5 and 4.5. Again, deal with the stuff outside the parentheses first. I divided by 4, then I square rooted, got my plus minus on this side. Let's write two equations, solve them both. All right, now on your own, do numbers 1, 2, and 6. All right, so don't think it's automatically no solution because I have to do this first. So I have x squared equals positive 25. Now I have x squared equal to a positive. I can finish this problem. I told you, don't do it until it's x squared by itself. Now I square root both sides, and it's x equals plus minus 5. Number 2. Now I have x squared equal to a negative. No real solutions. Okay? Get that stuff, get it to x squared before you make that judgment. All right, down here, number 6, coming up, need some room. Is there anything else outside to deal with? Nope, square root first. Don't forget your plus minus when you do that square root there. Write two equations, 2x plus 1 equals 6, 2x plus 1 equals negative 6. Solve. Minus 1. Comes out to be 5 over 2 or 2.5. Over here. Negative 7 over 2 or negative 3.5. Again, deal with the stuff outside first. Get it equal to the plus minus, write your two equations and solve. Any questions on any of that? Okay. So, the other thing would be round to the nearest 100. So they don't always come out perfectly clean. So let's look at this one. Solve the equation. Okay, next step, square root. Square root of 7. So, a lot of textbooks that we've ever had want you plus minus square root of 7 to do that. Because square root of 7 doesn't break down. We spent all that time on the radical chapter, breaking radicals down. It doesn't break down, you just leave it. That's the answer. This textbook, however, is a little bit different, and they want you to write your answers to the nearest 10th, or 100th in this case. It says 100. So this is the time you're going to grab that calculator. You're going to find that square root button on your calculator. Square root 7 comes out to 2.645. Round appropriately. X is approximately 2.65. Make sure you round up appropriately. 2.645 to 5 rounds the 4 up to 5. Okay? Not sure how I feel about this, to be honest with you. I understand why they do it. Traditionalist in me likes this answer. I understand why they do this. All right, just follow the directions in the book. If it says to the nearest 100th, okay? Notice, I'm not rounding this. Okay, I'm not writing 2.5. I'm not doing that. Okay, if it's a clean fraction, 1/2, 1/3, 1/4, something normal, that needs to be written in fraction form. If it's an ugly radical that's an irrational number, nearest 100th is going to be the acceptable answer here. All right, let's do, why don't you guys do number 8. All right, so we solve the equation. Square root. Grab the calculator. Calculate. Square root 2/5.632. So that is plus minus 0.63. Notice the wavy equal sign, that means approximately, because that's not an exact answer, but it is an approximate, so that's what we're going to go with. All right, there you have it. There you are. Good luck. Get to work.